I made Italian meringue buttercream for the first time, and unlike some of my buttercream recipes made on this channel, this is actually my first time of making this Italian meringue buttercream because it relies on egg whites and sugar syrup, and for me it's almost like making buttercream from uncooked eggs, which I find slightly queasy. My favorite buttercreams to use are the Swiss meringue buttercream and French buttercream, all of which are on this channel for you to watch. However, on the subject of making Italian meringue buttercream for the first time, things didn't go quite as planned, but in the spirit of showing you all the challenges that may arise from learning something new for the first time, I'll be taking you through the mistakes I made and what I should have done better, as well as the results of my first attempt at making Italian meringue buttercream. Make no mistake, there's a reason why this buttercream rates the highest in taste, stability and mouthfeel among all other buttercreams, and I found that to be true despite the challenges that came along with the process. So without having to waste your time, let's dive right in. To start with making the buttercream, I had to degrease all utensils and elements that would be used in making this buttercream. And the reason why this is important is because grease or any oil residue in the mixing bowl or glass holding bowls will interfere with the egg whites whipping up properly. So over here I took some time to wash all my utensils, after which I wiped each clean with some vinegar and paper towel. I started with the mixing bowl, followed by the whisk, the saucepan which will be used in making the syrup, and the glass bowls for holding the other ingredients. I have a video giving you the top 10 tips for making Swiss meringue buttercream linked up here for your convenience, and I find all those tips will apply to making Italian meringue buttercream, so I encourage you to check this out in your own time. This part of the process of degreasing the tools is done, and we're off to measuring the ingredients. For full disclosure, I am using the recipe of Preppy Kitchen, which I'll link down below, because for a first attempt I have to start somewhere, but over time I normally adapt even my borrowed recipes to suit my own preferences. But it's worth giving credit to the recipe developer, and John's recipe details of Italian meringue buttercream comes in both cups and grams, which I prefer. The recipe details are on screen for you to check, and as you can see, I am breaking and separating the egg whites from the yolks. A good tip for doing this is to separate the eggs when they are cold, which may prevent the yolk from breaking into the egg whites. Egg yolks contain fat, which, like grease or oil residue, will interfere with the meringue making process, so it's key to get the egg whites cleanly separated. Whilst I am measuring the ingredients and organizing them in advance, you'll find keeping organized is key to making Italian meringue buttercream, which I didn't quite observe very well, but I'll be talking you through more of that as we go along. The egg whites are separated and measured. Next is a saucepan into which some granulated sugar goes and water is added. This will be boiled into sugar syrup needed to cook the meringue later. I have some pure vanilla extract for flavor, and for a good mouthfeel, I completely recommend good quality vanilla extract. There is salt and cream of tartar, which is not on screen currently, and this is simply because I hadn't organized properly, which plays into one of the key mistakes I made. But mistakes aside, I have another important ingredient here, which is butter. I could talk you through the butter consistency needed for any buttercream, but I've already done that in my French and ultimate buttercream recipes, so please do check those out, which are linked in the description box for you. Now it's time to start making the buttercream, and first the saucepan of sugar solution is set on a source of heat to cook to a temperature of 240 degrees F, or the equivalent temperature of 115 degrees C, which is the soft ball stage in candy making. And at this temperature, the syrup will be drizzled gradually into the meringue. Whilst the syrup is cooking elsewhere, the meringue is to be made, and it's important to note the syrup and the meringue have to be made at the same time, which makes keeping organized key to the process. To make the meringue, the egg whites are poured into the cleaned out mixing bowl, and the whisk attachment is set to start whisking. Now this is where not being so organized began to affect my entire process. But let me back up a bit. I did say this was a borrowed recipe, and yes, in the science of recipe development, it is important to read and understand the process. I reiterated this as point number 1 in my tips for making Swiss meringue buttercream, and yet somehow I completely ignored this tip. But I did watch Preppy Kitchen's video thinking I had grasped all the details, and looking back I had barely done that, and here's why. So when the egg whites are whipping, I was supposed to add a bit of salt and cream of tartar and let it whisk from slow to break the egg whites, whilst gradually increasing the speed and adding some sugar to assist in the meringue formation. As you can see, I literally set the egg whites to whisk straight away on high speed, whipping until the egg whites were almost at soft peak. I did eventually add the sugar and cream of tartar, but that was later in the process because I had trouble finding the cream of tartar in my kitchen. I had also not measured the right quantity of sugar to add, so at this point I wasn't expecting anything much from making the buttercream. I let the meringue whip dough to near stiff peaks, and it was time to add the syrup. What you don't see on camera is that I took a call right before tending to the syrup, and by the time I got back to the syrup, it was 147 degrees C, which is way over what I needed the syrup to be, and this meant the syrup was almost crystallizing. With the near crystallized sugar syrup added to cook the egg whites, the meringue was whipped to stiff peak and cool. It was time to add the room temperature butter a bit at a time until it was all done. I must confess I was waiting patiently at this moment for the buttercream to collapse into a soupy mess for all the mistakes and broken rules. But I was pleasantly surprised the buttercream held together smoothly, and I noticed the color looked plainly white. But that was before I added some vanilla extract to discolor the buttercream and to add some flavor. The whisk attachment at this stage is swapped for a paddle attachment, and it almost seems as though our buttercream is done. The paddle attachment is left to run on slow for 5 to 7 minutes to smooth out the buttercream and even out the air bubbles. It is then transferred into a bowl for use later. So my take on stability is that Italian meringue buttercream holds it on, and it's the most stable I have come across in the use of buttercreams. I'll mark this buttercream for a 10 out of 10 for taste. For the downsides of my mistakes, I had bits in the buttercream from crystallized sugar pieces that were crunchy to bite into. But I know they shouldn't be in there in the buttercream, and they made the buttercream a little less smooth than I would have liked it. The crystallization meant that there were dry sugar bits on the edges of my mixing bowl and sugar crystal residue in the saucepan for making the syrup, which I had to soak up first before washing up. But in conclusion, my first attempt at Italian meringue buttercream wasn't as bad as I thought, despite all the mistakes and challenges I made. And I must admit, I will still be sticking with my Swiss meringue buttercream, and that is simply because of preference. The video for how to make Swiss meringue buttercream is showing right on screen, and I promised you I followed the exact processes, and the results are great to see. Click to watch, and I'll see you in my next video. Thanks for watching.